AI agents are already booking meetings, updating records, and moving work across tools. So, what happens when they become the real day to day user of your software? Welcome to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons, the podcast where we cut through the noise and share strategies that actually drive customer led growth. Each week, we bring you straight talking conversations on adoption, retention, expansion, all things AI, and everything in between. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. I'm Jason Noble here in London and with Jason Whitehead over in the States. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
Today, we're talking about something that Jason and I have spoken about a few times and with our guests and at a few events we've both been to. But it's something that might sound very niche, and that's just going to grow. We're using agents to help us work, to help us be more efficient, to build things for us. But agents don't care about your interface the same way that we as humans do. They care about access, structure, speed, predictability, and whether they can actually get the job done.
Yeah, and aggressive to say they actually care about it, but that's what they need. And so, when we look at this, it's a product design conversation. That's really what it comes down to. And it's a commercial one. If all of your customers are moving towards agents, you need to be able to support them effectively to be competitive. So, when you look at this, if value is being delivered in a different way, then the way you position, sell, and support your product has to change too. There's that knock-on effect.
Completely. And I think this is the first thing to really get straight. So the customer now has split into different layers. And we've talked about this before in previous episodes. You've got the economic buyer, the person signing off the spend. You've still got the human end user, the person accountable for the outcome.
Yeah.
What you might have now is an agent sitting in the middle doing the actual work. And we've got to think about this.
Yeah, and that's the real shift. That for years, SaaS was all about making software easier for the humans, like you mentioned. And now part of the challenge is how do we make it easier for those machines to operate and get everyone to play well together?
I think that's the key thing. And once you see that, a lot of the old assumptions that we've made start to change. They start to wobble. Because if an agent's pulling the data from your system, if that agent's making recommendations and triggering actions, and then moving into another system, your UI is no longer the whole product. And if at all, it's not even the same amount of the product.
Yeah, and that begs the question, if your UI, if it's not the main product experience anymore, and the visible interface, that UI layer, it's only one layer of a much bigger operating model. What does that mean?
That's so true. Exactly right. And I think the human might still buy the software. The human might still govern the outcome, but the day-to-day operational user may increasingly be a machine acting on the human's behalf.
Yeah, and so when I think about that, it really becomes now you're judging the product in two ways. Is it good for the person, and is it good for the agent?
That's the key thing. And so with these changes, what starts to matter more?
Yeah.
So first of all, you've got your API. If the product can't be accessed cleanly and reliably by other systems or agents, you've got a problem.
Mhm.
Secondly, it's your data model. And we've said this before, and it's a problem been around forever. If your data's messy, inconsistent, or buried in odd places, even agents will struggle. They need structure. And third, it's the clarity of action. Can an agent understand what to do and do it safely?
Yeah, and Jason, I'd add one more, and that one would be trust. And I think
Yeah.
once your machines start acting on behalf of humans and the people still need to know what's happening and why it's happening and how much control they still have. They have to have that trust there to be able to say, we'll work with it effectively.
Such an important point, Jason. And I think this isn't just a technical shift, it's a trust shift. The companies and providers that win here won't just be the ones with clever AI. They'll be the ones that make the whole experience legible, reliable, and safe.
Yeah, and I think that means the explainability has to matter more. You've got to have the guardrails in place, especially with the AI. And permissions are going to matter more. Visibility is going to matter more. All these things come together because people really need to know what the agent can do and what it did do and how the steps are there and what needs to happen.
So absolutely. And I think if customers feel like the system is doing things to them rather than for them, that trust will disappear really quickly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I think, let's make this a little more practical, a little more tangible here. What does this actually change for the SaaS companies, Jason? What do you think?
I think the answer is it actually changes quite a lot. It changes
Mhm.
product design because you're now not just designing screens, but you're focusing more on actions, permissions, and machine readable workflows. It changes onboarding because you may be onboarding both humans and systems.
Yeah.
Changes support because issues are no longer only about a person getting stuck. It could be an agent failing to complete a task across your platform. And it changes the way we think about customer success because adoption starts to look different when usage is at least partly machine driven.
Yeah, I think those are going to be some big changes that, especially the support and the customer success angles and making sure those folks can support
Absolutely.
an AI customer. But when I think about that too, it also changes your packaging and your positioning. And a lot of SaaS companies, they still talk about ease of use in a very human centered way.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly, buyers care just as much about whether the product plugs into their agentic environment as well as their human environment, and make sure that it can do the work without that manual effort.
I think that's so true. And again, that's something else we've got to start thinking about. And the message changes from how our platform helps your teams work better, faster, more efficiently, to how our platform helps the right work happen, whether that actor is human or machine.
Yeah, and that's some very different positioning and way to talk about your product. Because now the story is partly about interoperability, orchestration, and trust rather than just the interface and usability. So I think that's just a major, major shift. Yep. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Action.
I think this also has a big knock on effect post sale. So after we've gone through that initial interaction, in onboarding, you're no longer only teaching people how to use and adopt the product, but you might also be helping them connect systems, define actions, set rules, and decide where the automation should sit.
That's so true. And people need help with all of those things because new customers won't know that instinctively. And so what I'm listening to here means your onboarding is becoming less like training and more like workflow design.
That's it's a great way to sum it up. We've had great guests on talking about education, but this is a shift when you're now not just thinking about humans. And I think going back to support, the issue might not be I clicked on this and got stuck. It might not work,
Mhm.
but it could shift to the agent failed to do what we expected, or it did something we didn't expect, or it handled the first part of the task perfectly and got
Yeah.
wrong once. So it's a different conversation.
Oh, it's going to be very different. And I think that creates a different support motion too. It's going to be more diagnosis involved, more process training, more understanding of integrations and machine behavior. And so your support people need to not just be experts in your product, but also with AI and how AI works with your product.
It does. It changes the kind of experience and skill set that the humans
Yeah.
need. And I think then if we look at customer success, adoption becomes even more nuanced. Slow adoption might not always look like humans logging in and using the product every day. It may look like smoother automation, more trusted workflows, and actually less manual interventions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you're thinking about that, if you're not looking at, the logins or the other things, it really does say, what does this mean for our traditional health measures? Do we need to update those? If you're still looking at clicks and logins, you might get a sense that your product's not being used, but it's actually becoming more valuable because the agents are doing more. And that really frees up a lot of other resources for your customer.
I think we need, as you say, we need to have a much broader view of what does value mean, what does adoption mean, and what does usage mean. It's changing.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're thinking about this, Jason, let me ask you, where did companies get this wrong? Or where do you think more of them will get it wrong?
I think one of the we're in this. I was going to say transition phase now, but it's probably beyond that. But we're still AI is still seen as a shiny new feature, but it's
Yeah.
not. And I think the companies are getting it wrong when they make that assumption that it is just another feature, and they
Mhm.
bolt on a co-pilot, a chatbot, and they think they've joined the future. But if the underlying product is still hard to access, the workflows don't work, if it's hard to interpret and hard to act through, then the AI wrapper on top of or around it doesn't fit the real issue.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I just have this image of my mind of like putting a really smartly dressed concierge in front of a shitty hotel. They can have a nice smile and a nice little coat and the whole bit, but you get inside and it's the same broken plumbing and the same disappointing experience all there. So I think without thinking that through, it's going to be a real challenge.
We said the same thing in I think of one of our previous shorts that we did, that even in customer success, what AI is going to do is expose the broken models. And it's the same here. AI will expose product truth. It will not hide it. If your workflows are clunky, if your permissions are a mess, if your data is inaccurate, unreliable, or if your integration model is weak or even non-existent, AI will surface that a lot faster. It won't fix it.
Oh, absolutely. And another mistake is still, I think there's a default mode, like let's design every valuable interaction here as though it's a person in front of the dashboards. I mean, you do have some automations in there and workflows and a lot of systems, but really they are designed for that human element. And how do we make this pretty and cute and intuitive? And I think if you stick with that assumption, you're going to be heading for a world of hurt.
So true. And I think that assumption is already aging. Humans still matter enormously, but increasingly they're going to operate through agents rather than through direct manual interaction all day long.
Yeah.
I think if I were a founder or product leader right now, I'd be asking quite a few hard questions. I'd be asking, can an agent actually use our product? Can the agent retrieve the right data cleanly? Can it take action safely? And can customers trust what happens next? And the big one is, are we still designing as if every important interaction starts with a person logging onto a dashboard?
Those are great questions, because I think those are ones that your customers and prospective customers are going to ask. And I always come back to that last one too, which is really killer, which is so many companies are still, I think, over investing in the interface and under investing in the interoperability and the outcomes and the ability to really be effective and efficient with the two user groups.
So true. And this is the change that we're going through. And it doesn't mean that the user interface stops mattering.
Yeah.
Humans are still buying the software. Humans still govern the outcomes. And humans still step in when nuance, judgment, and accountability matter. But the product surface is what's really changing.
Yeah, that's true. And if the product surface is changing, the story behind it has to keep changing too. When talking with buyers or existing customers, they need to have confidence that your product works in the world they're moving into, and that it will. And they may be early in their AI processes and in their AI journey, but they know they're going in that direction, and they need to have confidence that you're going to be there with them, and that they're not the one that's leaving you behind. So let me ask you, for SaaS leaders that are listening to this, Jason, what do you think are some practical takeaways?
I think the big one is start thinking about designing for both people and machines. Don't assumption that a great UI is going to have as bigger impact as it has historically. Don't assume that you just need to add AI on as a feature.
Yeah.
Don't assume that the usage is going to look the same. And don't assume that your buyer is only going to care about what the human sees on the screen. I think they're the key things to think about.
It's so true. And I think the word for me going forward is interoperability. You're going to have agents doing work. You're going to have humans doing work. You've got to have those team and human team working together and making sure that it's easy and there's trust there working throughout the workflows.
I think that's so true. And the real risk is not that AI replaces your users overnight.
Yeah.
It's that it changes how value gets delivered, but you keep building for that old model.
Yeah, I think that's probably the takeaway here. Your customer is still human. The people making the decision, and there will be some users that are still human. There's just no way around that. But the customer is getting work done. How they get the work done is changing, and it's changing fast.
Yeah, completely. And as AI agents are becoming part of the operating model for us, SaaS companies need to design for both people and for machines, not one or the other.
Yeah, and that's the real commercial risk right there. This is going to be product disruption for the vendor too. And if you're misreading who or like what actually experiences need to change day to day, you're going to be in a world of hurt.
Great closing point there, Jason. I think if you still think your product is only being judged by a human person clicking through screens, you're already maybe quite far behind.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and have our breakthrough challenge question for our listeners here. So here's your challenge question for this week. If you're an AI agent, if an AI agent became the main day-to-day user of your product, what would break first? Your interface, your data model, your permissions, or your value proposition? Think about that and make sure you're investigating there. All right, thanks for listening. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. If you enjoyed the episode, follow our show and please share it with someone else in SaaS. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or at breakthroughsaasgrowth.com. And if you know a brilliant guest or a sponsor who'd be a strong fit for the audience, send them our way. Until next time, keep closing the gap between what gets sold and what customers actually achieve.